Yeah, thanks. It was a little bit high earlier for the intro. Hi, everyone. I hope we all enjoyed that. We're going to have Bradley and Pablo joining us on live stream very, very soon. Oh, here they are. Can they see me? Hi. Have we got sound? Any sound?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. Bradley, lovely to see you.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
Nice to meet you.
Looks lovely and sunny where you are.
It's not bad, it's not bad.
Yeah. Really enjoyed the film. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hop into the Q&A. So first of all, before we start actually, guys, if you go to the Slido website, it should be, slido.com, that's the code up there. So if you want to ask Bradley and Pablo any questions about the film, then you need to do it through that website, and I'll be looking through them. But before we start with that, I've got some questions from myself. So first of all, in terms of, at the start of the film, Charlie has this moment where she's sort of saying, I think I'm going to make a documentary to her producer. Had you already reached out to her at that point, or had she already had the idea to make a documentary and you guys came on later? What was the process of the beginning of it?
I can't actually recall exactly what point of the film that was, but it was our original idea to make the documentary, and we approached her after having seen her first announcement on Instagram, and fortunately, she agreed to do it with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started off with her just like documenting the process a little bit. She was just gonna, it was always her idea to have this process be a lot more open than any of her previous sort of album or EP processes, and that meant like sharing a lot of stuff with fans through social media. But I think the kind of what to do with that was a lot more. Yeah, it was a lot smaller than turning it into a full feature-length documentary. So that was sort of something that we saw like very early on in the first. We kind of came onto the project. We found out about the project through seeing it through her Instagram, as all her fans did, as anyone else in the public did. So we kind of saw that, and after like 2 days of the project happening, we were like, this has like amazing potential to be something much bigger. We didn't quite know exactly what it was yet, but we just knew that we had to like document as much of it as possible, and hopefully something interesting would come out at the end of it.
And this is your first feature as well, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a big undertaking. So that kind of leads on to my next question, which was we see a lot of Charlie's creative process in terms of creating this album over lockdown without access to production studios and all the people that you usually work with. And I think that I'm assuming there must be some parallels between that and your creative processes. So you weren't able to film her physically, is that right? So how did the pandemic influence your filmmaking process?
Yeah, I mean, it completely dictated like everything about how this film was made. I mean, one of the huge things was, as you mentioned, we weren't able to be in the room with any of the subjects in the documentary. So we kind of had to give up a lot of control. Like the work that we had done up until this point had, we mainly work in music videos, and our sort of style that we usually tend towards is like something like very considered, like we have ultimate control over like lighting and set design and all of those kinds of things. And like we had all of that taken away from us, which was at first like really daunting, but I think in the end sort of made us focus in on what was really important about this story. And it just like, it made the story the central. It just like, it put all the importance on the story, and like without any bells and whistles to go with it. And I think like that actually ended up giving it this really authentic feel that I hope the film sort of has.
Yeah, I think it's one of those classic scenarios. People say it a lot in film, that like your limitations become your advantages, and like at the beginning, I think directors always scream back that like that's not true, and that's how it feels at the beginning at least. But actually, it really was an incredibly liberating experience, and it really did make the film what it was. And I think what's interesting is like the filmmaking process really did echo the album making process. Like, you know, the whole creative a big part of the creative undertaking and inspiration for Charlie was working within those limitations, only working with the resources she had. And I think without kind of really realizing what we were doing at the time, that's exactly what we ended up doing too. And I think like that way of working, like Pablo said, without all the things that we're used to, without all the control, without all the lighting, the cinematography, and all the rest of it, will really influence how we make films forever. I think it was a really important part of really learning how to make films.
Yeah, I think just one more thing to add to it is like, because we were stuck at home and everything was done virtually, it kind of opened up the possibility of talking to these kids, like her fans, like in loads of different places all around the world. That, you know, had we been more precious about how we were shooting this, or capturing any of those interviews and those other subjects, like we probably would have had a much smaller pool to sort of work from, because yeah, this just opened up. Like we were on Zoom for the first few weeks of the process, just all day talking to people in Australia, then like Europe, America, Mexico, just like all over the place. So that was sort of another thing that it opened up.
And how much, so you had all that footage from Charlie and then all from fans as well. How did you find the footage from different fans? How did you reach out to them? And then how did you decide which bits to use? I'm assuming you had hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. So that must have been a long time in the editing room.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a very long editing process. I think we had like over 4,000 clips in the end. It was mad. But part the way we sourced the clips, so obviously we sent 3 cameras to Charlie and Huck, and those guys were filming from inside the house. And then in terms of the fans, we started reaching out to, I think we actually were looking at like who was commenting on the posts from the album, and then like DMing certain fans through there, and then just like got in a process of interviewing. And through that and obviously just because of the nature of the project, like we knew from the beginning, like we didn't know exactly how, but we knew the fans had to play a very important part in the film. So we started reaching out to them and really just like building relationships with this fan base and like earning their trust. And I think it kind of helped a little bit that we had worked with Charlie a lot in the past. Like a lot of them knew who we were, and they also became like a really important part of the production process too. Like there was some of the fans where, you know, we'd go to them and say, do you know anyone that like might be having a tough time or be in this certain situation, or like be getting like a certain thing emotionally from the project? And then they would then send us and link us up with other people. And so like we really did immerse ourselves in the network and community of fans. And I think just seeing like firsthand how much they knew each other, about each other, how much they cared about each other, and how much they wanted to interact with us and interact with each other, became like the central sort of inspiration for the story. So the production process, and if you like the casting process in some ways, was very organic and really fed into kind of themes and messages that we were exploring.
Yeah, one other interesting thing, well, one other thing that sort of came up during the sort of like casting process and finding these other subjects was this extra layer of them having to self-document as well, because I think like as the film sort of touches on, a lot of these kids are dealing with some like pretty heavy mental health issues, and a lot of the time that meant it was hard for them to sort of see value in their own stories. And you know, we had to rely on them to sort of turn the camera on themselves and sort of have the confidence to, you know, let us know what they've been doing, even if they didn't think it was interesting. I think that was quite like that was quite hard for a lot of these kids. But I think in the end of it, with the ones who sort of stuck with it, hopefully it was something that was kind of rewarding to work through as well.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to open it up to the audience. We've got quite a few questions coming through Slido. So Got one from Isaac, and he says, what did you think was the hardest part of making the documentary?
I think the hardest part was just the editing process. This is the first time we have made anything this long. It's the first time we've made a documentary, and just like finding the story and finding the narrative arc through all these things, and particularly sort of weaving in the secondary subjects, the fans, and 'cause there's sort of like three stories coexisting through this film, like three different levels of connection. Like one is Charlie with her fans, one Charlie with Huck, and then on like a more personal level, Charlie connecting with herself, and just like finding a way of interweaving those three sort of ideas with like hopefully a successful arc over the entirety of the film was really hard work, particularly when we were sort of always catching up. It's not like we had the idea for what this film was sort of supposed to be, then we go out and try and shoot stuff to fit that. We were just receiving folders with footage from Charlie's house every couple of days, and had to like find the story through that, and also find it within the sort of 4 weeks, 5 weeks of this project happening live. Like we were always just running out of time, and yeah, that was challenging. But I think there was just a lot of aspects of this story that when we first started wanting to document it, we didn't even know were there. Like Charlie had started therapy really recently, just before the pandemic sort of hit, and also her moving in with Huck. These were two things that we kind of had no idea about going into the project, but that revealed themselves over the course of those weeks. And it was sort of like trying to be really reactive to how we tried at least have some thoughts on how that was being captured in the house, which was hard as well. Everything was hard.
Definitely. And we've got a question from Matthew, and he says, hi, Bradley and Pablo, been a huge fan of your work since the early PC music days. Do you have any fun memories you could tell us about the Hey Cutie or Hi videos?
Thank you. Hey.
Thank you. I don't think.
I mean, Hey Cutie will always be one of my favorite videos that we've ever made, just because it was our first ever music video, and I think it was at a time when we had just finished art school, and we were still we were very optimistic and like full of energy and had all these ideas, and we were trying to like put every single idea we ever had into like 3 minutes, even if it was like in the tiny details of the set or something that like people would never pick up on. So it was like very creatively fulfilling at the time, even if it was like, I think after having worked in music videos for a bit longer, you kind of maybe like tailor your ideas so they are easier to digest or something like that, or like you're more conscious of the audience and them being able to understand what you're trying to say. But I think like at the time we weren't thinking about that at all, and that was kind of like don't know, it made it a more interesting process in some ways. It's not really a fun story. So.
Yeah, I was trying to think of any anecdotes. I haven't been thinking. It's really catching us off guard, these questions.
Sorry, I'm grilling you.
We'll come back to you.
Okay, yeah, have a think. So this one then, this person's asking about the drone shots and whether it's your first time filming from a remote location. And I'd like to springboard off that and also talk a bit about the animation that is really prevalent in the film and I think works really beautifully. So these are two kind of not unusual, but stylistic choices for filmmaking. Was that related to the pandemic that you had to do those, or would you have tried to incorporate that anyway?
Yeah, I'll start on the animation. The animation, it did well. firstly, it felt like a sort of obvious medium choice because of the pandemic limitations. We couldn't shoot in a way that we usually would in terms of like applying cinematic principles to it and trying to make it look beautiful. So we knew we wanted to try and like create something that was like visually inspiring to us in another way. And so animation felt like a really good option for that. And the other reason, it wasn't just a stylistic choice. Um, Part of the inspiration for this documentary came from the first time we attended Club Quarantine Party, which was, I think, the one where Charlie actually performed. And it was like at the very beginning of the pandemic, everyone, at the time, we were just as anxious as everyone else. No one really knew what was going on. There's loads of uncertainty. But we found this party and it just felt like a hub of hopefulness, and just being with all these people and connecting was very inspiring. And it felt like a new, it just felt very new, and it felt very at the moment, it felt very inspiring. It was almost like everything that sci-fi films have been talking about for years in terms of like virtual reality and this new way of connecting and like a virtual space was coming true. Me and Pablo discussed it, and we said like we wanted to figure out a way to document it. And then obviously this Charlie's album project came along, and it was kind of the perfect subject ground. But the reason that comes into the animation is because like conceptually the way we were thinking about it was that it's really interesting how in this time where we are all forced to be apart, we were all alone and disconnected. Charlie and others in Club Quarantine created these virtual spaces where we almost became like these virtual characters of ourselves and were connecting in the virtual world. And so we wanted to create visual representations of that. So that was the idea behind the avatars in the film, and like the kind of arc of that story was that they all go up to this like utopia, like virtual space where they can hang out because they can't hang out on planet Earth. So the animation was a important part, and it was an exciting part too. And the drone, what was the question about the drone shot specifically?
First time filming from a remote location, and the person just wants to learn more about the drone shots and how.
The drone,
Yeah.
the drones were quite funny because Charlie actually, well, she doesn't anymore, but she used to live next, like 5 minutes down the road from me and Pablo. So the drone felt like a really yeah, it is kind of related to the pandemic actually, because we were thinking like we need to come up with interesting cinematic ways to capture this again without actually being anywhere near Charlie. So we borrowed a drone of Pablo's old roommate and literally flew it like from our house over the neighborhood to her house. Just had some of these hilarious moments where we were like hovering over their house. It was really bizarre and funny. And we didn't end up using that much of it, but it was it was also our first time remote shooting, and it was, for all that, I think the film is a really basically every single method for making this film was because of the pandemic, and that's how it came together.
And someone else wants to know about how long the project took to edit and who came up with the title Alone Together.
I mean, I guess we didn't start properly editing until Charlie's project had sort of come to an end. So that was kind of, my timeline's a bit out of whack now, but I guess we started off working with 2 editors on it because we decided to set ourselves like a ridiculously unachievable deadline of finishing it in like 6 weeks or something like that. So we started off doing that, realized that was totally impossible, edited until about July, and then we had a screening where we sort of screened the first assemble of the project, and it was like an hour, 40 minutes. We thought it was incredible, but then sort of like soon realized that it was not at that point incredible. And we took sort of a month off to sort of recalibrate and like really just like hone in on what it was we were trying to say. So there was a really sort of like clear thread running through the whole film. Then we sort of went back with a different editor and edited for another bunch of months. I can't remember now exactly how long it took, how long we were editing.
We
but
we started editing when the album finished, which was what, like mid May, and we finished editing in December.
I'm trying to do the maths quickly. How many months is that?
It was long.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time.
8 months.
And I think I'm going to just ask you one more question. And I'd just like to know, so the fans, presumably the fans that were part of it, got a copy and they got to watch it. And how did they respond? How did the angels that feature heavily in the film, how did they respond to it? Because it's this quite touchingly intimate portrait of both Charlie and the fans kind of exposing these mental health issues and personal stuff. Was anyone surprised by the content, or were they happy?
I think they were happy. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of the fans still haven't seen it because we're awaiting distribution. So
we still owe a few Zooms with some of our main subjects to really get how they reacted to it. But I mean, we have had messages from all of them, and they seemed pretty euphoric and ecstatic about it. And I think, yeah, I think they were just as equally as passionate about us, really. Like, maybe it wasn't. They knew, I think it was like, it wasn't really about, they didn't see it as like about them. They really saw it as like something for the community, and that was really touching. And yeah.
I mean, I think probably more than the final product, what was, I think, more important was actually the process of making it together. I think that was actually, gave us all a sense of purpose over those few weeks, and like it felt really good to be like super invested in something at that time, and like it being hopefully a decent film at the end of it is kind of a bonus in a way.
Because someone's asked on here, and I know that my colleagues and myself have been receiving emails about when can people watch it, because there's obviously all these angels that really want to see it. So you're awaiting distribution. Can you talk about that? Do you have any dates at all?
We have no
dates.
But we are trying to do it. We're pushing it through as soon as possible.
The UK can watch it on Selects on our website for the next 72 hours, and industry members can watch it worldwide as well. But yeah, fingers crossed. I hope it gets a release soon, because I think it really deserves it. All right, thank you so much, Bradley and Pablo. Lovely to speak to you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.